Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses today. It's really unfortunate the amount of misinformation that's out there about that's trying to mislead American families and the people across America about the effects of the TCJA. If we look at the facts and the data, the TCJA allowed more Americans to keep more of their hard-earned dollars, while Treasury ended up collecting more in revenues. A year before TCJA, in January of 2017, CBO projected FY23 revenues would be $5.346 trillion. After passage of TCJA, CBO revised their estimate and estimated that the revenues would only be about $4.182 trillion, or a reduction in revenues by about $174 billion. In reality, the FY23 revenues totaled $4.439 trillion, as we can see in this chart, exceeding even CBO's initial estimates before they factored in TCJA. And this is only the most recent year. If you go back FY22, the numbers were bigger. FY21, they also had bigger numbers. And while these tremendous results are still working to correct the record, we're trying to correct the record regarding CBO's wildly inaccurate projections and correcting the lingering misinformation about the impact of TCJA, which is more important than ever as we prepare to renew, extend, and strengthen the best aspects of the TCJA in 2025. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was massively successful due to the focus on promoting economic growth and U.S. global competitiveness. Prior to TCJA, the U.S. had the highest statutory corporate rate among developed countries. We also had a worldwide tax system that incentivized companies to hold large cash reserves overseas. By lowering the corporate rate to 21% and reforming our international tax system, specifically using the GILTI and FDII provisions, we were able to bring jobs back, bring intellectual property back to the United States, and tax revenue. After more than 5 years, we can confidently say the system worked. Corporate tax revenues have increased, even at a lower rate, and there's not been a single U.S. corporate inversion in that same time frame. As we look towards 2025, it's essential that we find ways to build upon these and other successes. One key pro-growth provision that must be addressed in 2025 is immediate R&D expensing. Since amortization took effect, the growth rate of R&D spending has slowed dramatically from a 6.6% on average increase per year over the previous 5 years to less than 0.5% over the last 12 months. Mr. Ramirez, lagging R&D growth is detrimental to our global competitiveness. As someone who's led an international engineering and manufacturing firm, how does R&D amortization impact our ability to compete in the world?
Congressman, thank you for the question. I think this is the single most important issue in the tax reform right now. I mentioned earlier, China has a 200% super deduction for R&D. My biggest competitors in China, and now since 2022, I get a 20% deduction for R&D. I've got to amortize it over 5 years. Since 2022, that one policy has created a $20 million hole in my balance sheet. I have $20 million less liquidity because I have to amortize R&D than if I could just expense 100% of it in the year incurred. That's a massive drag on our ability to invest and create new products and deploy new capital and grow our business.
Yep. And as I mentioned, we're seeing a reduction in R&D expenditures. We're also seeing a reduction in jobs in research and development because of that. Senator Graham, appreciate you being here today, so much that you've covered. You talked earlier a little bit about international tax and particularly the Pillar 2 provision. I've been a staunch opponent of the approach that was taken to look through that. I want to give you some more time to just talk about some of the concerns that you have about that. I think it's just detrimental, and I think whatever you can add to the conversation would be great to help with clarifying that.
Well, again, I think you don't have to give Americans an advantage. You just need to give us a playing field that's flat as compared to our competitors. I think that the 2017 tax reduction was very effective because it moved us from the highest corporate tax rate in the world into a competitive range. The American economy works better because we have greater ability of people to make decisions. The system is more flexible, more adjustable. That is changing now with the regulatory burden. I can honestly say, as someone who engages in business in the United States and in Europe, there is no socialist government in power in Europe that has a regulatory burden that is growing at anything like the regulatory burden in the United States.
And as we see, that just
And
so
it's
devastating.
very, very harmful. And the point being is that it costs jobs, growth, and opportunity, and in the process, it's not going to make me poor, but many of the people that are having great concerns expressed on their behalf are going to be poorer as a result of it.
Thank you, and I appreciate your time. I yield back.